You're listening to Procurement 6, the weekly podcast from the team at Art of Procurement that summarizes this week in procurement in just 6 short segments.
Hi there, my name is Philip Eitzen, and today is Friday, June the 7th, 2024.
6.
This week's episode of Procurement 6 is brought to you by SpendPros, Art of Procurement's procurement services offering, where you can access one of over 100 category-specific or transformation experts to elevate the impact of your procurement organization. And today's tip of the week is actually related to increasing your relevance to your key stakeholders and driving closer alignment. So each stakeholder has their own challenges, both operationally and strategically, that we probably don't know about. They're facing the same questions on the future of their profession and their career due to digitization that we are in procurement. Only once we have a better understanding of what really keeps them up at night can we start to develop procurement solutions that compel them to come back for more. So my action item that I will challenge you on today is this. Select a single stakeholder. Start researching the major issues they are facing today. Now, at the macro level, you can look at conference agendas for their profession, reports on the future of their profession, similar to what we have in procurement. At the micro level, if you have that level of relationship with them, just start asking them, or those that are close to them. In doing so, you'll gain more insights into how to position yourself as a must-have versus a nice-to-have relationship for your key stakeholders.
5.
Much of procurement success in the business comes down to them being able to communicate their mission, approach, and value to the rest of the business. In a recent Art of Procurement podcast, I talked with Frank Mackay, the Chief Supply Chain and Procurement Officer at Jabil. Frank discussed the results from Jabil's latest annual supply chain survey, and in this short clip he explains why communication is the key to building stronger, more resilient supply chains.
That's absolutely correct. It's trying to figure out your audience, who they know, whether that's an engineering community, whether it's a marketing community, whether it's your IT community, just adjusting and pivoting to make sure that, however you're communicating, that it's done as effectively as possible, and that when people leave the room, they're just not scratching their head saying, I don't know what acronyms they were talking about there. I think I get it, but I really don't. So, we spend quite a bit of time here just making sure that we do have an effective communication strategy when we are talking to your point, the stakeholders that we're serving every day in the business, or a little bit more externally with the board of directors, or and again, maybe a little nod to procurement and supply chain being elevated here. When I go in front of our analysts, shareholders, and investors as well to explain, what we're doing with supply chain. You can imagine the interest is never been more great than it is right now on folks trying to understand how resilient is your supply chain, and can you cope with the future events that may come just as well as maybe you cope with the recent past events.
To listen to the full episode, go to artofprocurement.com/podcast or search for Art of Procurement and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, or click the link in today's show notes.
4.
This week's Art of Supply episode is the monthly interview, and this month Kelly had the opportunity to speak with Victor Suarez. Victor is a retired US Army colonel who worked for the US Department of Health and Human Services and was the lead vaccine program manager for Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine in Operation Warp Speed 2020 to 2021. He recently testified before the US Senate Committee on Armed Services Subcommittee on Personnel about the shortages in the pharmaceutical supply chains. What's interesting is that drug shortages follow a lot of the patterns we see in other high-risk industries and supply chains, such as the outsized impact of countries like China and India, who can keep production costs low, the disincentive to innovate associated with thin profit margins, and the need to understand where in the production process value and risk are created, ultimately determining who has the greatest opportunity to minimize it. To hear the full episode, you can go to artofprocurement.com/supply or subscribe to Art of Supply on all major podcast platforms.
This is Procurement 6 from Art of Procurement. To get notified every time an episode is published, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe. 3. The Economist 2024 procurement research, sponsored by SAP, was published this week. I was proud to play a role in this year's study and the analysis of over 2,000 global respondents. And we'll share more insight into the results on AOP over the coming weeks because they really are fascinating. But an interesting thing that stood out was that there's no real consensus on the preferred procurement operating model. Asked about procurement operating model changes in the next 12 to 18 months, companies' intentions are roughly evenly split between two directions. One is increasing the role of centers of excellence, which supports best practices in strategic sourcing, knowledge management, performance tracking, and other areas. The other is adoption of a center-led model, in which the central procurement team makes decisions in key areas while leaving business units to decide on unit-specific procurement matters. Centers of excellence complement and support this center-led approach.
2.
In this week's episode of the Love Procurement podcast, Kelly is joined by Arnaud Malade and Jared McAdoo from iValuer. All three of them are darksiders, so practitioners who dared to cross the line to join a provider. Arnaud and Jared, they discuss what this transition is like and how it's allowed them to do more in support of procurement than if they had stayed as practitioners. So they share how having a background in procurement changes the way they do their jobs today, why so many people think a job at a provider is the dark side, and the advice they would give their former practitioner selves knowing what they know now. Now, to listen to this episode, you can search for the #LoveProcurement podcast wherever you get your podcast audio, or check out the iValuer channel on YouTube, which is where you can also go to see the conversations.
1.
On June 12th, join us for Why is Facilities Management So Complex? It's a live conversation with Alex Carlson, former Vice President of Category Management within Wells Fargo's Corporate Properties Division and new VP of Facilities Management Services at Fine-Tune. Alex and Kelly will talk about the benefits of managing costs as well as services through a cost-plus model, navigating the transition from service provider to client, facilities management challenges in C-store, big box retail, and office environments, and in-depth category perspectives and stories of managed services survival. Now, to click the link in today's show notes or go to artofprocurement.com/calendar to register and to see all of our upcoming events.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Friday at 6 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've enjoyed this pod, help us grow and tell your peers to search for Procurement 6 wherever they get their podcasts.